Hi, my name is Martin Rosenqvist. I have a bit more than 15 years of experience within the automotive industry. Before joining Polestar this summer past, I spent the bulk of my career at Volvo Cars. Most of the time in different project management positions. Recently, I did a 3-year stint in China, where I got to develop and lead a team that then, in turn, were developing new cars, primarily using our China team as the base for the competence and resources. Of course, Polestar is also linked to China in many ways. As one of our main shareholders outside of being listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in New York is the Geely Group. And we also work as an asset-light company relying on smart usage of the existing plant infrastructure within the Geely Group, both in China and elsewhere. And to a large extent, a lot of change is happening and being led from China. There's a revolution of smart electric vehicles coming into the market, extremely competitive for the OEMs, very exciting for the consumers, because the change that needs to happen needs to be consumer demand driven. But more on that later.
From the very beginning, we set out to explore. We knew from the start that we needed to create a highly desirable brand. Design is the link between the human and the technology. It builds the bridge. We create a Scandinavian high-tech look that has not been seen that way before. Sustainability is not limited to getting to the electric drivetrain. What is our next step? And next step obviously is
A little bit about Polestar. As a separate unit, Polestar has a longer history than what is depicted on this page. But Polestar as a standalone company, as we know it now, first saw the light of day back in 2017. Together with the launch of our Polestar 1 plug-in hybrid 2-door GT sports car, a car that was built in limited numbers in a tailored facility in Chengdu. In 2019, we launched the Polestar 2 with an uninvited event where journalists and other influencers were physically uninvited from attending the launch, making it a show with online focus instead. The physical debut was in Geneva. In the beginning of 2020, we started building the Polestar 2 in Taizhou, China. We revealed our Polestar preset concept and we released our first LCA report. 2021 saw us outlining the Polestar Zero project, announcing the use of blockchain tracing for certain materials, and in 2022 we were quite busy showing the Polestar 02 concept, listing our company at the Nasdaq Stock Exchange and premiering the Polestar 3. Last year we launched the Polestar 2 BST editions, together with launching the Polestar 4. And this year, well, we will obviously put a lot of focus on getting a few of these products into the market, whilst there might always be one or two nice tidbits of information along the way. So keep your eyes and ears open. So why do we exist? Well, it's not only to make nicely designed products that are fun to drive. Not only. The automotive industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. We are quite well aware of this. We know for a fact that if we continue along the same track, we are on our way to overshoot the 1.5 degree target by a lot by 2050. To meet the climate targets of the Paris Agreement, action needs to be taken, and it needs to be taken now. Polestar. Well, we are a young Swedish electric car company, determined to improve the society we live in by accelerating the shift towards sustainable mobility. We want to offer a route to climate neutral and circular mobility. Even in this early stage, electric cars can help tackle the climate crisis, but only if we transition quickly enough. So when it comes to climate neutrality, we have a few things to agree on. One is the definition. Climate neutrality being a state in which human activities result in no net effect on the climate system. Achieving such a state would require balancing of residual greenhouse gas emissions with emission removal, as well as accounting for regional or local biogeographical effects of human activities that, for example, affect local climate. IPCC in this case is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Defining a climate crisis, well, the world is currently facing a climate crisis of an unprecedented scale. Significant efforts and investments are required to decarbonize the global economy in time. Its dire impacts can already be seen, and if it's not properly mitigated, they will result in catastrophic consequences to biodiversity, human life, society, and the global economy. The IPCC reports confirm the widespread and intensifying nature of climate change and the need to limit global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then the automotive industry. EVs is a low carbon solution and part of the transition to carbon neutral economy. But to reach true climate neutrality, we need to eliminate greenhouse gases from all phases of the car's life cycle and charge them using renewable industries. Most industries, they're still struggling to innovate low carbon alternatives to conventional products and services in the first place. In the automotive industry, the low carbon alternative has already been placed on the market. Electric vehicles are therefore a part of the transition to a carbon neutral economy. However, the life cycle of electric vehicles still substantially contributes to climate change through emissions of greenhouse gases in the supply chain, manufacturing, logistics, use phase, and at the end of life. This is something that we are committed to change. Climate change and neutrality is really important. The change is a severe crisis with potentially catastrophic consequences for the environment, for human life, for society, and obviously for the economy. The IPCC reports confirm the widespread, rapid, and intensifying nature of climate change and the need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Mitigating its effects requires a transition to a low-carbon economy, including the widespread adoption of electric vehicles. For us to get to that point, we take it in steps. One of those steps is to make sure that we design cars that will help take us to a sustainable future. And that changes the way we actually think about design.
Materials and colors have often been an afterthought, and now, with sustainability so high on our focus, we are starting to design around materials from scratch. We are starting to design inside out. I think at design we have the freedom to create our own briefs. We don't necessarily work with consumer profiles in terms of what the demographic or the age group of a customer would be. It's more people who want to buy into our philosophy. And I think the most interesting part in our creative process is when we start put together these themes. In Polestar 3, we offer 4 distinct themes, and that's really the base of our creative process. It's where we start. it doesn't always have to sync, you know. It's about translating our thoughts into a material board. We use the different materials as the basis, which is quite a paradigm shift from how it has traditionally been done in the automotive industry.
So how do we make sure that we can measure sustainability, that we can track the progress that we're making? If you choose a Polestar 2 over a petrol car equivalent built on the same platform, and you charge that Polestar 2 with renewable energy, you can more than halve the climate impact, including production and end of life and use phase. And regardless of how it's charged, the Polestar 2 has a lower carbon footprint. Electric cars are a scalable climate solution, but they're not perfect or sustainable. EVs are not the end game, but they are a pretty good starting point. We know that every internal combustion engine car replaced by an electric vehicle is a step in the right direction and enables the fulfillment of climate neutral mobility. But we're also aware that our rapid growth will increase Polestar's absolute greenhouse gas emissions over the coming years. Therefore, we primarily track our progress by looking at the greenhouse gas emissions intensity, that is, the quantity of carbon dioxide equivalents emitted for each new car put on the market. If we look at the Polestar 2 in 2021, the greenhouse gas emissions intensity was 40.2 tons of CO2 equivalent per sold car. In 2020, it was 42.8, so that's a 6% decrease year over year, starting at the baseline year. And by 2040, our goal is for all cars that roll out of our factories to be climate neutral. We've drawn up a roadmap which brings together our strategic initiatives and sets our tangible targets for the coming 4-5-year periods between now and then, obviously the first one soon coming to an end. Although emissions per vehicle are decreasing year on year, absolute emissions across our value chain in 2021 increased by 185% compared to 2020, and that increase is directly related to our growth, our increased sales, our greater market presence, and that is continuously obviously going forward. But by growing, we have more power to drive change within the automotive industry and to give more people the opportunity to switch to carbon neutral mobility. Now, as we all know, going from an ICE car to an EV car is a step in the right direction, therefore offsetting our increase when growing as a company. The 2040 goal is based on absolute emissions, to which the main contributors are purchased goods that we use to produce our cars. And to achieve our 2040 zero emissions goal, we need to start reducing absolute emissions in the second half of this decade. We are closely following up by identifying and tracking the emissions produced by each department within Polestar, and then we are working to eliminate them. The emissions, that is, not the departments. Emissions are calculated based on the guidance of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. To help delineate direct and indirect emission sources, improve transparency, and provide utility for different types of organizations and different type of climate policies and business goals, 3 scopes, 1, 2, and 3, are defined for greenhouse gas accounting and reporting purposes. Scope 1 is direct greenhouse gas emissions, and they occur from sources that are owned or controlled by the company. So, for example, emissions from combustion in owned or controlled boilers, furnaces, vehicles, etc. Now, Scope 2, electricity indirect greenhouse gas emissions, that accounts for greenhouse gas emissions from the generation of purchased electricity consumed by the company. And purchased electricity obviously is defined as electricity that is purchased or otherwise brought into the organization boundary of the company. And then Scope 3 is other indirect greenhouse gas emissions, and that's an optional reporting category that allows for the treatment of all other indirect emissions. And those emissions are a consequence of the activities of the company, but occur from sources not owned or controlled by the company. And examples of that are extraction and production of purchased materials, transportation of purchased fuels, and use of sold products and services. Now, that's quite a hefty task, but still, it's one that needs taking. Okay, then how does this relate to me in my everyday job as a vehicle business program lead? Well, for me, it's all about targets. We know how to target set various things. Cost, for instance. We know how to target set cost. We've done it forever. We have cost buildups, we have bottom-down calculations, we have followed by top-down pushes, we have should cost calculations, optimized cost alternatives, investment budget, amortizations, etc. We have generations of knowledge of how to measure, calculate, and ultimately target set cost. The same goes for weight. We know what everything in a car weighs. We know what it weighs, why it weighs, how much, how to reduce, where it mustn't weigh, where we will add and where we need to reduce. In addition, we can calculate weight as a factor of cost, knowing in the full life cycle of the car how much every added kilo adds in cost. But what about sustainability? How far have we come there? Well, to be honest, not nearly as far as with other parameters, but a lot further than others, and probably a lot further than others have. Pictured here are example formats of how and when we track sustainability progress in a vehicle program. Now, this is only examples of how it's done at the highest level. There are of course many more layers of information and detail available. So we track various elements throughout the whole program, from program start to job one, where we do corporate milestone reports and make sure that we know exactly where we are at in terms of what we want to present, in this case, sustainability targets. Examples of what we track is CO2 equivalent climate impact, circularity and recycled content targets, renewability targets, and also traceability for material, both those that lie within the hands of Polestar and also within our suppliers by, for instance, the introduction of the blockchain technology for traceability. All of this, of course, needs to be poured into a product. As I said in the beginning, this change needs to be consumer demand driven. We need to make really the best products to look at, to experience, to sit in, to ride in, and to drive. We are pouring everything we know into something that has been previewed as the Polestar Precept concept car, but you will come to know it as the Polestar 5. So what's next? What do we do when we launch the Polestar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Well, for us, obviously, we go back to zero. In Polestar, we have what we call a moonshot project. And it's a project where we actually need your help. Have a look at this. We cannot do this alone. We need the help of partners, suppliers, startups, universities, innovators, governments, etc. Search continues to identify more partners within raw materials, bio-based chemicals, polymers, electric components, noble gases, and other base materials. This is our product portfolio, current with the 2, 3, 4, and future with the soon to be released Polestar Precept 5 and the Polestar 2 Roadster number 6. We believe the proof is in our cars. We believe that the future is exciting, largely because we are creating an exciting future. We know that we are part of the problem. We firmly believe that we can be creators of the solution. Please join us on our journey towards an exciting future of future mobility solutions and with stunning products at the core. Thank you for participating in this session, and I look forward to some interesting questions in the following Q&A.
Thank you, Martin, for that wonderful session. Do we have any questions in the chat? Do we have Martin in the chat?
I am in the chat. I'm
Great.
seriously trying to get the video back on.
Yes. In the meantime, there you are. Great. Or you were for a second anyway. Yes, you're here. Great. I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned the change to more sustainable transport must be driven by consumers. Which markets, as you have a bit of experience of different markets, would you say are driving the change? Is it Nordics, Europe, America, China?
It's a very good question. And the answer is that there are different things happening in the different markets that simultaneously drive a positive change, I think. So if we look at China and the explosion of new electric vehicles that are coming there, but also their investments in macroeconomics and infrastructure and green power is really something quite interesting. They also have the advantage to some extent of being able to put into effect policies and changes very rapidly. So when I lived in Shanghai, a concrete example is nobody knew about sorting of garbage until there was a rule enforced that from one day to another, everyone, 25 million inhabitants in Shanghai, needed to start sorting their garbage. And basically overnight, everyone got a bin or several bins. Everyone got instructions of how to do it. And there were enough surveillance in place that everyone who didn't do it could get a pretty hefty fine. And instantly, people started sorting their garbage, which created an enormous and very rapid effect on the closer living environment. And those types of policies we see in effect in China. In Europe, obviously, We see a lot of corporations that have as their core message now, or part of their core competences and messages, sustainability, and we see a lot of consumer demand. When it comes to electric vehicles in the US, one could say there's still a huge appetite for gas guzzlers in the US, but we should not forget that the most sold vehicle in the world in 2023 was the American designed Tesla Model Y. So I think there are, across all regions, different aspects that are driving this.
Really interesting. So speaking a bit about that, your 3 years in China, how, besides the recycling part, how did that change your perspective on sustainability? Or did it?
Well, I think the perspective of sustainability from a company perspective, or across different companies, have changed a lot. I was in Shanghai between 2019 and 2022, and it's a vastly more conscious, I would say, environment now, business environment to be in. We saw the changes starting to happen obviously already several years ago, with a lot of investment banks looking actively for conscious sustainability actions in companies in order to invest. But we see that now being obviously much more common. Then a country like China is obviously still, I think, the biggest investor in coal power, but also by far the biggest investor in green energy as well, both nuclear and wind, solar, the Three Gorges Dam being the largest in the world, etc. So there's, I hope, part of a more positive movement.
Yeah, interesting. So Polestar 4 orders opened up recently. What
Yes.
color and what spec should you get if you're ordering one?
Yeah, you could be bold and get it in gold. That was a rhyme, not maybe intentional. I personally really like the pearlescent white, the snow, when you have the contrast color lower skid plates. I think that makes for a very nice package together with a big panoramic roof. You should definitely get the Plus pack. I would definitely get the long range dual motor setup. You get the 4-wheel drive and you get the 0 to 60 acceleration of 3-point-something seconds. So that's almost too fast. And then it's a personal preference if you want the pinstripe gold seat belts that you get with the Pro pack, or if you go full gold seat belt and calipers and everything with the performance pack. So there are quite a few nice options to choose from. So yeah, order books are, the order intake is open now. So
yeah, and that's obviously, I mean, really, because you had just the Polestar 2 for a while, so it must feel awesome to finally have both soon to be Polestar 3, but also Polestar 4 on the market.
Yeah, we have showrooms with various cars now, which is awesome. Yes.
And I looked at the 3 live, and it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the hardest part of for you as a car manufacturer to reach net zero for a car?
For us, it would be relatively easy to make these incision point actions. You know, you could change one material, one process, but it's the fact that it's such a complex scale of producing, you know, procuring, producing, then shipping out, selling a car that is supposed to be out there for several years, and then taking care of that and making sure that we can do something with the material that's left. That whole cradle to grave philosophy, that is obviously the most important, just the sheer size and time aspects of having a car in production, and then the longevity of it.
Yeah, because you don't have control over the whole process really, so you have to.
No, we can try, and we can put in place a lot of different measures to get as much as possible, definitely. And we can measure the car over the life cycle, and we can make analysis of that, of course, to the best of our ability. But ultimately, the goal is to sell the vehicle.
Yeah, of course. Do you have any other advice for the manufacturing industry that wants to move further in their sustainable product development?
Yes, for me, it's obviously you need to know your customer and work according with them to make sustainable products that are attractive, of course. But I guess most do. Then in an early phase, being able to set targets, obviously stretch targets. I talked about just now the moonshot project we have with the Polestar 0, but to try to identify what is possible with the reach and get the supply chain on board. I was part of quite an overwhelming activity when I was with Volvo. When I was in Chengdu, we had supplier days. We called it a yearly event. I think there were some 900 attendees, and we talked about the path towards sustainability. And it was really, really obvious that the supply chain was almost even more excited about the prospects of that than we were. It was quite overwhelming. So to get the partners and suppliers on board early so that you could set those targets and follow up on them, I think that's crucial to success.
Interesting. All right. Are there any questions in the chat? Otherwise, I would like to thank you, Martin, very much for attending and presenting here. And obviously, we want to thank everybody that has listened to this session. It is being recorded, so you will see it again if you want to later on, or show it to a colleague or friend. But right now, I want to say thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.